All right, welcome to Bet the Edge. I'm Jay Croucher. Solo pod today with Mr. Dinsick, unavailable. Going to run through a couple of these MLB awards markets with National League Rookie of the Year after Shota Imanaga got blown up a couple of days ago. And there's been some movement around that market. We'll talk American League MVP as well. And then quickly close out with some soccer chat with the Champions League final. And then a bet that I like in the MLS outright. But let's start off with National League Rookie of the Year. Shota Imanaga has, after his hot start and after having an ERA that was sitting below 1 for a time, he has been the odds-on favorite lately. He's still minus 110. The Phenom, Paul Skenes, is plus 300. And the surger in this market, Yamamoto 6-1, Jared Jones, who got lit up as well, he's 10-1. And then we get into the hitters, Joey Ortiz, Jackson, Merrill at 16-1, 18-1 type of range. So I think this market starts with the top two guys naturally in Imanaga and Skenes. And that's where you have to, I think, begin the pricing handicap of just those two guys head to head. Who is more likely to win? Now, the market says Imanaga, just largely just because he's been entrenched and Skenes has only had a few starts. I think these guys are just neck and neck at this point, and I'm not even sure that Imanaga should be the favorite. And the reason for that is that Imanaga's advantage in this head-to-head with Skenes is going to be volume. Skenes is going to end up at like 110 innings pitched. Shota is going to end up a full starter's workload, north of 160 innings, you would suspect. I just don't think that actually matters a great deal for this award. It matters some, but not as much as it would in, say, Cy Young, where Skenes has no chance whatsoever because he won't have the workload. For Rookie of the Year, and this is really the same across, it's the same in the NBA at least, just workload isn't valued as much for whatever reason, because I think it's, in a way, it's not necessarily a forward-looking award, but it's an award I think that is more reflective of talent and peak within the season than sustained, war accumulation. And so I think that the fact that Skenes is, he's a phenom, he is a true rookie, whereas Imanaga is, 30 years old and he's been a professional for years. I think that is going to work in Skenes' favor. I think the fact that Skenes is just a better pitcher than Imanaga, frankly. Like, Imanaga is great, but he has an xFIP of 3.4, an xERA of 3. Skenes has got a strikeout rate of above 12 per 9. Now, Skenes is a bigger injury risk than Imanaga, which is, somewhat material. Just he throws a lot harder. As far as starting pitchers go, I think Shota is very low on the injury risk spectrum. Now, he's still a pitcher, so there is some degree of risk. But the fact that he doesn't throw that hard, the fact he doesn't really have an injury history in Japan relatively makes him more of a sure bet, I think, to get through the season. But just with Skenes' upside and the fact that he is a true rookie, I think this is effectively a coin flip between those two. I don't think at plus 300 there's a ton of meat on the bone on Skenes, though. And I'd love to back the no side of Shota at minus 110. But I think those two are the rightful two favorites. I would disagree at this point with Yamamoto even being the third favorite, just because he's got a 3.5 ERA. He's got the same issue as Imanaga, as, being an established pro who's not really a true rookie. And I think that is going to work against him. And so I would be looking more at longer shots who are hitters. And so really the two guys who stand out are primarily Joey Ortiz and then to a lesser extent Jackson Merrill. And the reason for this is, one, I don't think that Imanaga and Skenes are bulletproof for the reasons I laid out. And then secondly, we've seen time and time again in this award is that if it is a close race, the tie goes to the hitter, because the hitter is the guy who plays every day. And voters really care about that. Don't seem to necessarily realize that a pitcher can accumulate as much value in one start every 5 days as a position player sometimes can playing all those 5 days. But that's beside the point. We're betting on what voters are going to do as opposed to what they should do. And I think that Spencer Strider against Michael Harris was a really good litmus test for this, where Strider being the pitcher, Harris being the hitter. Strider got hurt at the end of the season, which muddied things a little bit, but still Harris won that relatively comfortably. And voters went on record and they said that the tiebreak for them was that Harris plays every day. And now Joey Ortiz, in terms of just the war that he's accumulating as an everyday player who is, sometimes batting leadoff for the Brewers, who are a team that, right now is odds on to win their division, feel good story. He is kind of a fascinating player in himself. There was a good article on Fangraphs about him. Like the fact that he is looking like he's just going to be a four-war player, really high floor on a good team and a good story. I think that makes him really compelling. I think that he is the best bet in this market. I think he should frankly be half of what his market price is right now. And then Jackson Merrill is the other guy, less inspiring. His numbers aren't great to date, but his underlying stuff is really good based on his exit velocity and his expected batting average, expected slugging, all the StatCast stuff. He should be a lot better than his actual numbers that he's produced. And so I think that he is still in the mix, and he's 18-1. I much prefer Ortiz. Just Ortiz has banked a bit of a head start. I think he probably has a bit more of just a hitting profile that will lend itself to winning an award like this with a bit more power. But Merrill is in the mix. And ultimately, I just look at this board and I see that there are 4 pitchers as the top 4 favorites, and that is immediately just a red flag because pitchers are at a disadvantage in this award from the start. And they're also just much more, vulnerable to attrition than hitters. So I would think that Ortiz should be the 3rd favorite in this market. Odds agnostic, I would just take him over Jones and Yamamoto. And I think that Merrill should be below Yamamoto, certainly in the odds, but he is live as well. But Joey Ortiz is the guy that I'm riding with in this market. All right. The biggest stars battle on the clay courts of Roland Garros for a chance to be crowned a Grand Slam champion. Stream the French Open on Peacock today through June 9th. Okay. American League MVP market. This has been fascinating today. There's been a lot of swings in this one around kind of the sun that's orbiting Juan Soto, who has been pretty consistent. But we've seen Aaron Judge, his price got out as far as 25-1. He is now the 2nd favorite in the 3.5-1 type of range behind Soto. And then we have the 2 young superstar shortstops in Bobby Witt and Gunnar Henderson in the 4-1 to 5-1 range. And then Kyle Tucker has kind of been the 5th guy at 6-1. Now, I think there's a lot going on in this market for starters. I would say that the starting point here, though, is that when he has been healthy, this is the 3rd year running of Aaron Judge just being the best hitter in baseball. And I think that what gets overlooked a little bit with Judge is that despite his numbers in 2022, when he hit the 62 home runs, and 2023, when he was a monster, just not quite to the same level, is that despite the insane stats that he put up, and for anyone who's forgotten, in 2022, his slash line, his batting line was 311 average, 425 on base percentage, 686 slugging, and he hit 62 home runs with 131 RBIs. And also, to me, the most shocking stat of that season that Judge put up, he had 16 stolen bases. Guy's 6'7", 282 pounds, and he had 16 stolen bases. Just makes no sense that he was able to do that. But anyway, I digress. The thing is with Judge and with these numbers that he's put up, and last year he was at 267 average, 406 on base, 613 slugging, which is a 174 WRC plus. That's an MVP caliber stat line. That's around the WRC plus that Bryce Harper put up in his MVP season in Philadelphia. The thing with these stat lines is that Judge has consistently underperformed what his expected stats should have been. So last year he slugged 613. This year his expected slugging is 712, which is completely insane. So that was 2023. This year, again, he is slugging 613 on the dot, and his expected slugging is 100 points higher than that. His average should be 16 points higher based on the StatCast stuff. So there is a line of thought that, is Judge, is he just a guy who there is something about his swing and the fact that he hits the ball so bloody hard that just he's never going to be able to live up to his expected numbers? Like maybe there's some of that, but you go further back in his career, And he does, for the most part, outperform, but he's had seasons where he's been pretty much in line with his expected numbers. Regardless, right now he is underperforming and he has a 185 WRC plus. He has 3.3 WAR, despite basically taking the first month of the season off. I just think that he just has the highest ceiling of anyone in the American League by far, really. And the fact that he just accumulates WAR so rapidly with his power stats, like his average outcome from here is hitting like 49 home runs with an average that is hovering around 300 while also playing center field on a team that's going to win its division. So I think that Judge should be the favorite in this market. The weird thing is just with Soto, who I think should be the second favorite in this market, and the fact that Soto will be the guy that everyone wants to vote for because he's never won an MVP before. He's obviously a made man. There's no one's going to have any issue with giving Juan Soto an MVP award in terms of his pedigree. He also has a lot more narrative than Judge. The fact that, he's come to New York and donned the pinstripes and they've won the division. Well, they're odds on to win the division the year that he gets there. I think that stuff, though, it's a little bit overrated because people in baseball, I think more than any other sport, they don't really get to choose who they get to vote for because the numbers can just get so overwhelming. And if Judge is just going to lap Soto in terms of his offensive value, his defensive value as well, I would say, just given that he plays center field, then people I don't think are going to be able to just be like, I want to vote for Juan Soto, even though all the numbers are worse. So I think Soto, his odds should be close to Judge's, and I think he should be the second favorite, just given that, one, he's obviously no slouch himself, and two, he's, I think, much less of an injury risk than Judge, who consistently gets hurt. I tend to think that injury risk is a bit overrated in these awards, but when you're 6'7", 282, I think there is reason to believe that you are a higher injury risk than someone else going forward. So I think Judge should be the favorite. I think Soto should be second. And then I think that Gunnar, Bobby Witt, and Kyle Tucker should be really clustered together as the next three guys. The one thing I would say there is that I think with MVP, and people look at, I think the two most important stats in MVP are one, WAR, and in terms of Fangraphs WAR or Baseball Reference WAR, I think people kind of view them somewhat evenly, maybe slightly into Fangraphs, as people get a little bit more enlightened the older we get. But WAR is the most important stat, and then OPS, I think, is the second most important stat, and they've been very predictive of your winners in the past. OPS, WRC plus, largely saying the same thing. And with MVP, what I've found, and this makes sense, is that you would rather, just in a nutshell, that your WAR value come from offense instead of defense. Because one, it's just louder. The stats are just louder if they're offensively based. Two, like everyone can kind of see what your average is and your slugging and how many home runs you hit. It's a lot harder to value your defensive run saved that's forming your defensive WAR. So you would much rather your WAR be driven by offense. And that is the leg up that Tucker has in a way over Witt and Gunnar Henderson, is that Gunnar and Witt, a lot of their value comes from playing shortstop. And the fact that, Bobby Witt is one of the best defensive shortstops in the league, and that is juicing his WAR a ton. At the same time, offensively, he hasn't quite been the same guy as Soto or Judge or Tucker or even Gunnar Henderson. He has 9 home runs right now, Bobby does, and the other 4 candidates, they all have 15 plus, which is going to hurt him. So I think that Tucker has a little bit of an advantage there. Now, Tucker is hurt somewhat by the fact that his team just hasn't been as good as these other 3 teams that we're dealing with in the Yankees, the Orioles, and the Royals. So that hurts Tucker. I think that team success it's a little bit overrated in MVP in baseball, given that we have seen that, Mike Trout, who famously has never won a playoff game and has only been to the playoffs once in his career, he has been able to win multiple MVPs. Bryce Harper won MVP on a Phillies team that didn't make the playoffs. Shohei Ohtani has never made the playoffs. What I think team success means in MVP for baseball And Ken Rosenthal, I remember he said this like a random Phillies Mets broadcast during Bryce Harper's MVP season when he was asked, like, is it a problem that, Harper, Tatis, Soto, who were the main candidates that year, is it a problem that none of these guys play on, likely playoff teams? And Rosenthal gave an answer, which I think is very representative of the voter base as it stands now. And what he said was, it's not the be-all and end-all that you're on a playoff team because you're only, one guy on the roster. You can't, it's not like basketball where you can drive outcomes as much as LeBron James can. But he said it's a tiebreak. And if there are two evenly matched candidates and one of them is on a playoff team and the other is not, then the tiebreak goes to the guy on the playoff team. And I think based on what other voters have said, I think that is pretty widely held a stance. And so that may ultimately hurt Kyle Tucker, may ultimately hurt Bobby Witt too. As good as the Royals have been, they are still, much less likely to make the playoffs than Baltimore and the Yankees. We'll say with Bobby Witt, he does have this little kind of high ceiling wrought variance aspect where if the Royals win the division, which would be kind of insane, but if they win the division, it's not insane given they're like a 25% chance to do so, but it will be seen as a massive story. And that could give him a leg up that counteracts perhaps some of the offensive statistical deficit he'll have against these other guys. But I think that Witt, because of that upside, he belongs, in, I would say, it's not even really tier 2. It's more like tier 1B with Gunnar Henderson and with Kyle Tucker. And I would have tier 1A as Judge first and Soto second. But these 5 guys, they're all pretty close. I think the odds largely reflect that. If I was going to make a bet at the moment, it would still be whatever the best price is that you can get on Judge if you're getting some 4-1 out there, just because I think that he should win the award if he stays healthy. But they're all pretty close. And the other main thing with this is that these 5 guys are so good that I think it's going to be so difficult for anyone to come from the clouds to catch all 5 of them because they already have a banked, more than a 1-war lead on the realistic field. Sorry to Anthony Volpe and Salvador Perez. I don't really see them as candidates who are going to be able to topple these 5. I would say the next 2 most likely players to win are probably Jose Ramirez and Corey Seager, just because Ramirez is putting up insane power stats. He has a great narrative being on the Guardians. He's a made man. He's been a perennial MVP candidate. People would love to vote for Jose Ramirez AL MVP. Just don't think he's quite got the juice. His underlying stats this year have been pretty bad. And then Corey Seager, who absolutely has the talent and the ceiling to match the top 5 from here on out or even exceed them. The issue is he just did nothing the first month of the season, and he's at 1.5 WAR right now. He's got a 128 WRC plus, and he's basically given these guys a 2 WAR head start. So it's going to be extremely difficult for either of those guys, I think, to catch up to the top 5. Suspect that it is highly likely that one of those 5 guys wins. And at this point, my money would be on Aaron Judge. So all rise. Okay, can Nelly Korda continue her historic run on the LPGA Tour? Find out this week when she competes against the world's best at the US Women's Open, presented by Ally. Tune in Saturday at 3 p.m. Eastern on NBC and Peacock. All right, close out with a little soccer chat. Champions League final is coming up on Saturday. Real Madrid minus 160 on 3-way money line. Dortmund are 4-1. The draw is plus 310. I think the most important market in a way is the Madrid to lift the cup at minus 300. Dortmund plus 230. It is always funny with these one-off finals where the discourse around this, if you're just listening to soccer podcasts, reading soccer articles, you would get the sense that Madrid are like minus 3,000 to lift the cup, and they're actually minus 300, which implies they're only a 75% chance to win. Certainly feels higher than that. At the same time, not really about to blast into the fairly liquid market of the Champions League final. Though it does actually, you would need stolen money to back Dortmund at plus 230. And they are clearly the inferior team, Dortmund. If you were going through the exercise of taking both teams' starting 11s and just choosing like a combined 11, I think you would just end up with Real Madrid's 11, which is completely insane. But that is the talent gap that we're talking about in a final like this. So uh, I have no horse in this race. I haven't placed any bets on the Champions League final. I don't really think that there is a way into betting this market from having an edge type of perspective. And so it is a little bit difficult to find one. My sense is that Madrid is going to win, and that if Dortmund do win, it will take something like they had in the second leg against PSG, where PSG hit the woodwork 4 times and Dortmund got very lucky and scored from a set piece. Now, Madrid are not some historic juggernaut. They're not as good even as, I don't think they're as good as Man City last year. I don't think they're really as good as Man City this year, frankly. But the gap between these two teams, I think, is smaller than the gap between City and Inter in the final last year. And Inter probably should have won that final. Strange things happen in one-off matches, but there is no reason to believe that Madrid are more vulnerable than their market price suggests. And there's no real reason to suggest that the market price is wrong on this one. All right, before we close out, I wanted to throw out a market price that I do think is wrong, with the much less liquid market of the MLS outright, less liquid compared to the Champions League final. The MLS outright, which if you just scan the different books offering this market, you'll find widely disparate prices. The pricing is all over the map on this market. There is not a ton of liquidity that is driving these prices. And the market has been extremely anchored to Inter Miami being this absolute juggernaut, which I don't believe they are for a couple of reasons. One, it just doesn't show up in their numbers to date in terms of their expected goal difference per 90, just the way that the market is treating them game to game. Even on Wednesday night, as they close minus 200 favorites home to Atlanta, who have been dreadful this year, they got absolutely trucked at home with their key players rested, with Messi in the lineup and Suarez and Alba and Busquets. They got destroyed by Atlanta. This team, offensively, they are a juggernaut. Defensively, though, I don't think they're particularly good. And yes, Messi is by margin the best player in MLS, as you would expect, but he's not at the level quite where his team is just an auto victory every night if he's healthy. And that's the other thing with Inter Miami, is that maybe this price gets closer to fair if you say that all of these guys are definitely going to be fit throughout the whole season. But this team has a really loaded schedule. They've got to deal with Leagues Cup. They've got to deal with Messi going on international duty. Messi's about to miss 5 games, which, by the way, there's some important games in there. He's going to miss, very likely miss. We assume that Argentina gets out of the group, which I am. He's going to miss a key game against Cincinnati, which will be important in deciding who gets the 1 seed. He's going to miss other games, I think, against Nashville, Philadelphia. These are no layups. So that hurts. Also, the key players are all very old, which exposes them to a bit more injury risk. So that is a problem with Inter Miami. And so I could not back Inter Miami at plus 188 to win the cup. I think the team to back at price right now is LAFC. If you hunt around, you should be able to find some plus 850, some 9-1. This whole market is being priced as though everyone plays in the same conference. And it's just not right. LAFC, they will have a path to the final that does not involve Inter Miami. They will only have to deal with Inter Miami in a one-off final, and Inter Miami are odds against to even make that final. LAFC by market are, basically at worst the second best team in the league, and that has been without Olivier Giroud, who is going to be coming in the near future. And now, look, Giroud he's not like 2014 Arsenal Giroud. He was also, though, the starting striker on a Milan team that just finished second in Serie A. So it's not like he's completely washed or anything. And also LAFC, they don't have a striker. So he will address their biggest area of need, and I think be pretty good in the process of doing so. right now on MGM, LAFC at plus 650. I've got fair for them to win it all at 5-1, and should be able to find better out there than plus 650. So I think they are the main bet. The key thing with MLS, both in terms of game to game and in terms of the outright market, is that home field advantage in MLS is bigger and more pronounced than in any other major soccer league in the world. And the reason for that is, I mean, there's a few things, and we don't know entirely what it is, but can have a pretty good guess that a large part of it is that teams play across 3 time zones. There is a ton of travel, and they play across different surfaces. And so a lot of this market has to be priced out from who is likely to have home field advantage. And so LAFC, with this recent run of form, they've put themselves in very good position to be a top 2 team in the West, while also being, just in terms of team rating, being the best team in the West. Real Salt Lake, who have, I think, a pronounced home field advantage because they play at altitude, and they are, with LAFC, the most likely team to get the 1 seed in the West. And so at 14-1, they would be my other bet in this market. So those would be the 2 teams I'd look at. But LAFC, I think certainly by margin, are the best bet at current prices. They have a completely stacked roster. Messi is the best player in MLS. Denny Bouanga, who I don't even know how Denny Bouanga still plays in MLS, frankly. Like, you watch this guy, like it's like he belongs in the Premier League. But he's still sticking around. He's re-signed. He is their superstar. If you have a bet on LAFC, you can join me in celebrating the sweet stepovers and rapid accelerations of Denny Bouanga as he looks like a kind of a poor man's Cristiano Ronaldo, a very poor man's Cristiano Ronaldo, but still a damn good player all the same. So I think that Bouanga and LAFC, they are the bet in this market. All right, we are done, or I am done. Don't forget to check out NBCsports.com for more information to help you with your wagers. Thanks to those watching on the NBC Sports YouTube channel. And if you're listening to us in podcast form, don't forget to rate and subscribe. Also a reminder to find all your favorite NBC Sports shows on Amazon Music. Just head to amazon.com/NBC Sports. Jay Croucher, I will see you soon.